Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is John Rouse, and hopefully you're here to learn a little bit about drones. Some of it will apply to you if you work at UF, and some of it will apply to you if you don't work at UF. Okay, so kind of pick and choose what you need to listen to on that. But hopefully, you guys will get a little bit of something out of this by the time we get done. Normally, I walk around and talk, but Andrea told me I had to stand still because they're going to videotape the presentation, so I'll do my best. No, UF does not have one of these kind of Predator drones, although if you've been to Gainesville and you know about 34th Street traffic at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I wish that I did have one of those, so it would make my commute back to the house a little bit faster. But as I said, my name is John Rouse, and I am the program coordinator for SUAS, which stands for Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems, and drones, synonymous. I wanted to be putting drone czar on my business cards, but they wouldn't let me put czar on my business cards. I do get called that around the office every once in a while, though. So you'll see a little bit about why they call me that. So we'll go a little bit further in here, and we'll talk about what today's agenda is going to be. We'll do some introductions. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I know a little bit about this facility, but not a lot. We'll talk about the responsibilities of what my office is and what it does. We'll talk about some rules, regulations, policies, and procedures for the FAA and for the university. We've got to have rules, don't we? So. And then a little bit about resources and contacts that'll help you guys do what you're going to do. So let me tell you a little bit about me first. So my background is I went to the university many years ago and graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I graduated in 1984. Some of you probably weren't even born yet, but that's okay. I earned every one of these gray hairs. Before I graduated from the university, I was hired by the Gainesville Police Department. And I did a 20-plus year career at the Gainesville Police Department. I did many different things there. One of the things that I did was started the aviation unit. My old partner and I started that right after the student homicides. So did that for quite a number of years, commercial helicopter pilot. After I retired from the Gainesville Police Department, I started flying EMS. And I did that all over North Florida, anywhere from Gainesville north, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Panhandle, Gainesville. And I did that for about a little over 7 years. Loved it. It was kind of sort of my dream job. It was a little bit boring because you just sat around like a fireman and waited for the bell to ring. But outside of that, the flying was fun. It was a pretty good job. But I ended up getting divorced, and I had a daughter who at the time was 14. I had full custody of her, so I couldn't do the flying schedule anymore. And it was a great schedule, 7 days on, 7 days off, and then 7 nights on, and then 7 off. So I couldn't leave her alone for 7 nights. So this is the soapbox part of the presentation. My soapbox is that I only know a couple of things from my experiences in life, and that is that life is precious and it goes away quicker than I can snap my fingers. And 2 is you don't get second chances, especially with your kids. They're 5 years old once, they're 10 once, they graduate from high school once, and if you miss that, it's gone forever and you never get it back. You don't get a do-over. So if you have kids, I encourage you, family, kids, doesn't matter. Treasure the time that you have and spend it with them. It will pay off in the end. It really will. So with that, after I decided to leave that, and I got a normal job, what I call normal, which was Monday through Friday, days and weekends off, nights and weekends off, which I'd never had that in 30 years, so it was kind of strange to me. But so I started at UF and Human Resources as the investigator for Human Resources. So I went all over the state for the 27,000 employees, and I did all of the discrimination cases, all of the Title IX cases, all the sexual harassment cases, all of the I don't like you, you don't like me, your perfume stinks, your cologne smells, you name it. I did those investigations all over the state. And that got old after a while. But in the meantime, I was voted best soccer mom 2 years in a row for my daughter, so that was pretty good. Yep, so everything in investigations was negative. Either one party or the other, by the time I got done, wasn't happy with the outcome. So I said, I need to change. So I ended up going over to facility services or physical plant for a training opportunity, which did not turn out as advertised on their end. So this position came open. I looked at it, it had been posted three times, and I'm like, okay, something's up, let me make a couple phone calls, and then in January of this year, I took over as the program coordinator for the drones for the university. So with that, I'll tell you a little bit about my office. My office is located under Environmental Health and Safety, under Business Affairs. Curtis Reynolds is the Vice President for Business Affairs, and he's charged with the safety of all of the campuses and all of the facilities. So how they determined where to put the drones, I'm not exactly sure, but it does fit here through Environmental Health and Safety under Risk Management is where I'm at. The Office of Unmanned Aircraft Systems Programs, there was a gentleman that had my position for about 30 days before I did, after about a year before I did. And he apparently was independently wealthy. He didn't need to work, so he quit after 30 days. But he's the one that named this, or that came up with this name, so I just left it. It sounded pretty cool. Worked for me. Current operators at the university that I know of, and I'm still determining more and more each day. Engineering, we have some folks over there that are working with drones. Some really cool stuff that's going on. If you hadn't seen it yet, there's one group that they are now, they're called the brain drone guys. And so what they've done is they've taken this device that fits on your head and it reads brain waves. And so you can actually go in, and I got to do it one afternoon, it was really cool. Sit down and you train the machine to match your brain waves. And so then they hook it up to the drone. So there's no more controller for the drone, it's just the drone and your head. And you think about it and it lifts off the ground. Starts up and it lifts off the ground and it hovers, and you think about it and it goes forward. It's actually pretty cool. So some of those guys are doing some pretty cool stuff. IFAS is using quite a few drones, and they are all over the state, and IFAS is a large umbrella for the university. So there's quite a few folks, and some of these fall under that. Agriculture, forestry, those are all using them. Journalism, and I had a question mark by it because when I first started getting ready to do this presentation, I knew that journalism had some, but I hadn't talked to anybody over there yet and hadn't found them. Thought I have found them since then. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'll be working with them this fall when football season gets here. Because they work quite a bit, journalism works quite a bit with the SEC network for all of the games, as well as CBS and some of that. So that's going to be kind of a busy time. Rec Sports has got one. They wanted to use it for some stuff for their fields, but they couldn't find their battery charger, so they haven't been flying very much. But they've got one, and then we have one. Environmental Health and Safety has one. It was purchased under the gentleman that was there for 30 days. He's the one that said, hey, we need a drone. They went out and they bought a drone, which I did bring today to show you. Maybe not the one that I would have suggested that we buy, but that's okay. We have one, and we've actually gone out and done missions as well for some of the smaller parts of the university that don't have a drone, don't have a pilot, or want to use it for a proof of concept so they can move forward with their possibility stuff. And then lastly, but not least, is third-party vendors. So anybody that wants to come onto one of our properties, I deal with those people as well. Pepsi, Gatorade, Joe's Drone Flying Service, you name it. If they want to come fly on our campus, any place, then we have certain requirements for those folks as well, mostly insurance requirements. Okay, so we're not going to be doing any pug flying today. But my office's biggest responsibility is safety. Drones are becoming more and more and more popular, and the integration of those drones into the national airspace is a big deal. You've probably seen all these crazy videos where people have flown drones near airliners when they're coming into land. So there's a lot of concern out there. Drones, it can be a great tool, but they can also be a danger if they're not handled properly. So safety is the biggest thing for me. Under Curtis Reynolds, our Vice President for Business Affairs, he's charged with the safety for all faculty, staff, students, and visitors for any of our facilities. So that's the biggest thing for us. On our main campus, we also happen to have a level 1 trauma center. So we have 2 rooftop helipads, and we also have the hangar that the Shandscare stores their aircraft at, called the Gator Port. We also have, being a trauma center, we have all kinds of EMS aircraft in and out, all times of the day and night. So we need to make sure that that's a safe environment for those folks as well, flying in and around. Last thing you want to do, I can tell you from experience, last thing you're thinking about when you're coming in with a patient to drop them off, and if they're in the back of a helicopter, there's a reason for that typically. They're pretty well hurt and they need to get someplace. So if I have to think about that as a pilot coming in about dodging drones, that's not a good thing. So hopefully, one of the things that I can do is provide a nice, safe environment for all the EMS aircraft. The other part of my responsibilities is compliance, mostly with the FAA. All right, the FAA has come out and said that, and we'll talk a little bit about this as I go through, but through the FAA, they have said anything that weighs more than 0.55 pounds, so 2 sticks of butter. If it weighs more than 2 sticks of butter, it's considered an aircraft by the FAA's definition, and it has to be registered as an aircraft, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when that happens, now that throws a whole bunch of rules and regulations into how you operate these things. So we'll talk about FAA compliance a little bit. We're going to talk about liability, not 100%, but the gentleman that does all the insurance for the university is 2 doors down from me, Brian. Super nice guy, but as you can imagine, with any organization that's as large as the University of Florida, liability is an issue. So we make sure that we try to manage that as best we can. Risk management. Unauthorized flights we get every once in a while. Recently, I had somebody call me from inside the stadium and said, hey, there's a drone flying inside the stadium. I didn't think we were allowed to do that. No, ma'am, you're not. Call UPD. We did. They transferred us to you. So I was able to call UPD. We did some training for their officers. There's not a ton of things that we can do depending on who that person is that's operating the drone, but it's more of an education process for them. Approved purchases. So if you're in the University of Florida system, if you want to buy a drone, then and if you're going to do it through our purchase request system, each one of those items is given a commodity code. And before I got to this position, they decided that they were going to route all those commodity codes through this position for an approval before you could actually do the purchase. I don't care what anybody buys, it was just a way for them to get their folks in the door and to let them know that there are other rules and regulations that they have to comply with. The other part of this that didn't come up until after I'd been there for a little bit was the fact that some of these drones are inexpensive. So you could take a purchase card or a P card, credit card, and you could go down to the local Best Buy and get a drone. And nobody would be the wiser. Nobody would know. At least from our office, nobody would know. That was, and since one of the things that I was doing for the university was being an investigator, I said, okay. So I made a couple of phone calls and said, hey, can you guys run a report for me? And they did. And I found 72 more purchases in the last 5 years where people had used a P card. Again, not that I care what they buy, but just let them know that we don't want them to get in trouble with the FAA. We want to make sure that they're doing business right. So that happens. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is flight statistics. As you can imagine, with 27,000 employees from Pensacola to Key West, it's kind of like herding cats. There's a ton of folks out there, and there's a bunch of folks that have been doing it for a long time also. But we need to have some way of figuring out what are the statistics for this new type of technology. There's no doubt in my mind that my phone is going to ring and it's going to be Dr. Fox, or it's going to be Dr. Lane, or it's going to be somebody from the university, and they're going to say, hey, John, how many research flights with drones did we do at the Ona Range Cattle Research Facility in the last year? And I can go, I don't know, which would not be good for me. Or I could say, yes, sir, hold on, and I could go tap, 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 and then find out, yep, we did 37. So statistics are a pain sometimes for us to keep and for us to record and for us to deal with, but they do serve a function, and that function could be justifying for purchases in the future for more aircraft or for more pilots. So it does come along pretty good. And there's another thing that we'll talk about a little bit later while I'm keeping those stats. I'll tease you with that one. And then last but not least, I don't want this to be just the bad cop of environmental health and safety coming down and regulating what you do, because we get accused of that. We do all the lab safety, we do a bunch of that stuff. So I wanted to be also a resource, the good cop part, for educators and for researchers. The more I get out in front, like today, then that helps. We will have some researchers that think, oh, a drone, that's kind of cool. I'll just run down and buy one and go out and do whatever I want to do. And they don't know about all the other things that come along with it. Or, depending on what their mission is that they're going to use that equipment for, it may not be a fit. Not to say that there are unscrupulous salespeople out there, but guess what? Professor Rouse calls up and says, yeah, you know what, I need a drone for my research. So I call Drones R Us, and on the other end of the line, the first thing that happens is that salesperson starts to salivate, and says, oh, Professor Rouse, I've got this Acme drone. It was built by Wile E. Coyote, and it will do everything that you want it to do, and it's only $37,000. And then they get to another point and they find out that, well, gosh, I could have done the same thing with a $2,000 drone from Best Buy. So hopefully on the front end, I can help out with equipment selection and or what the capabilities are, what some of the drawbacks are of different types of aircraft that are out there, drones, and how they may fit into your particular research project. I've done that on a couple already, and those folks, it has facilitated them getting through their research without having a hiccup as far as the equipment goes. So we'll jump into rules, regulations, policies, and procedures. So the first thing we'll talk about is with the FAA. As I said, that FAA now says if it weighs more than 2 sticks of butter, it's an aircraft and it has to be registered. So the registration process is fairly simple. You'll go onto the FAA's website, and you can type in FAA drone registration in any search engine or drone zone, and it should bring you to the FAA's webpage for drones. And you'll find a page on there for registration. It's pretty simple. It's all online. It takes about 5 minutes, and it'll cost you $5, and then it's good for 3 years. But you'll have to fill in some information about your aircraft. When you do that, you'll get this document back. And this is actually a registration certificate that you have to keep with the aircraft, and or you actually have to put that number on the aircraft. If you've ever seen larger aircraft, if it weighs more than 55 pounds, it has a different registration process. So it's an N number process, which is the same as regular airplanes would have. But you'll find on the website, it'll tell you where to put that number on the aircraft or how you can satisfy that requirement from the FAA. On the small one that I brought, I've just printed that out and folded it up and put it underneath the battery compartment so it stays with the aircraft. Okay? But yes, you'll have to do that. You'll have to register the aircraft. There are 2 ways to pilot these things. Since they are aircraft, you have to have some type of pilot training or pilot certificate. At the University of Florida, we have decided to have all of our faculty, staff, students, anybody that's dealing with this, to be a remote pilot and have a remote pilot certificate. You'll hear me interchange another phrase. It's called Part 107. Part 107 is the FAA's naming convention for anything dealing with drones. So as an example, you've got Part 135, which talks about air taxi on demand. You've got Part 61, which is regular manned aircraft. You've got Part 91. So I guess the only number that was next was Part 107. And so that's what you'll hear when you talk about drones in the FAA is Part 107. There's another part called Part 336, and that deals with hobbyists. So if Junior got a drone for Christmas and he wants to go out and fly, or she wants to go out and fly, then they will have to register the aircraft if it weighs more than 0.55 pounds. They don't necessarily have to have a remote pilot certificate, but they will have to have rules that they follow on the American Hobbyists or American Modelers Association. So that's the radio-controlled airplane folks. So there are organizations out there that exist for that, and you can go out and fly, but you have to follow what their safety guidelines and their safety rules are. A little bit less stringent than Part 107, but you still have to comply with most of the same rules and regulations. The Part 107 regulations, there are several. And jumping back for a second, the remote pilot certificate, basically it's a commercial certificate, meaning that if you're going to do anything for compensation, then you're going to have a remote pilot certificate. So for us at the university, since everything that we do, we're getting paid to do, that's a commercial operation. The FAA kind of sort of takes it to an extreme, meaning when they talk about compensation, meaning that if your son is playing soccer, your daughter's playing soccer, and you say, hey, John, can you come out and take some video of the soccer game for me, and I'll get you tickets to the game. Well, the FAA considers tickets to the game as compensation. So it goes all the way down to that kind of a level. The remote pilot certificate can be obtained in a couple of different ways. One way is if you're already a pilot and you have a pilot certificate, you can take a short quiz online, about 35 questions, and then once you pass that, you can turn that into an FAA examiner and you'll get your remote pilot certificate. If you've never had any kind of a remote or any kind of a pilot certificate at all, then you'll have to take an exam called the Airman's Information Knowledge Exam. That exam is the same exam that anybody that wants to get any kind of a regular pilot's license will have to take. It's about 60 questions long, and it covers everything from charts, airspace, Weather, there are probably about 8 or 10 different categories. Bethany probably took it not all that long ago, so she could tell you. Airspace and charts are typically the 2 areas that everybody has problems with. And the test, some of the folks that I've spoken to already, the test scares them away. And don't let it scare you away. It's not that hard, okay? It just takes, it's different. If you've never done it before, it just takes a little bit of studying. And then get with me here at the end if you're getting ready to do that. I've got some suggestions on what kind of study material to get. Because you'll log online and you'll find, and some folks will know this this old phrase that, you know, there's as many things online as Carter has liver pills. I can remember folks saying that forever ago. But basically, you can find somebody that's an expert no matter what page you go to or what link you click on. If you can study, it's not any harder than studying to take a driver's exam or anything else. So it's just a matter of getting the right material to do that. So I've got a couple of suggestions for you if that's where you're headed. Part 107 regulations. So under Part 107, there are certain things with drones that you cannot do. You cannot fly over 400 feet. You can't fly at night. You can't fly over people. You can't fly beyond visual line of sight. And that's just a couple of them. There's a couple other ones in there. There are methods that you can get. You can't fly in controlled airspace. There are methods to get authorizations or waivers to be able to do those things, but they're not all that easy to get. The largest one that the FAA has given out as an authorization has been flying at night. That's well more than half of the authorizations that have been requested. Beyond visual line of sight is one that they're working on, but hasn't come about yet. The hardest one to get would be flight over people, which may or not apply to you folks, but there's only been, I think, 2 or 3 that have been granted for flight over people. And that's CNN was one of them, and they spent well over $1 million in 2 years getting that certification to be able to do that. But there is a method to get that if you need it for whatever your research is. The other thing to mention fairly quickly is that since the University of Florida is a public university, we do have the ability to fly under what's called public use laws. Public use laws are a little different than Part 107. Basically, you fly under a certificate of authorization, a COA, and then anything that's written in that, and that COA is a document. So anything that's written in that document, you can do. If it's not written in that document, you can't do it. So it becomes very restrictive. But it does have certain applications with agriculture. If you start to spray with a drone, and that's coming, there are drones out there that spray now, but those are going to fall under not only the drone section, but under Part 137, which is the agricultural operations. The FAA is so far behind on drones right now, they're never going to catch up. There's no way. Yes, sir?
With the spraying drones, is it the weight of the drone itself or the weight of the drone with the...
It's partly the weight. If the weight is over 55 pounds, there are additional requirements, but more than that, under Part 137, if they dispense any type of economic poison, then they fall under a bunch of different rules, much like crop dusters do. And you'll have to have an applicator's license and some other stuff to go along with it, DEP and that type of thing.
So it's just the weight of the drone, it's not the weight of the drone with the camera?
No, it includes the payload. It's the gross weight of the aircraft. So if the aircraft weighed 55 pounds and then the payload weighed 10, so now you're at 65 pounds, you're over 55 pounds. Okay. DJI, which is one of the manufacturers, as a side note, they have one called the Agris, and it's designed with a hopper for liquid, and it's designed to not be over 55 pounds even with that liquid. All right. But I am currently talking with, I put in for a waiver, to give you an example, the main campus in Gainesville. About half of the main campus in Gainesville is under Class Delta airspace for the Gainesville Regional Airport. So that is controlled airspace. Without an authorization or waiver, you can't fly there. So I put in for a waiver at a symposium, the FAA symposium in Baltimore this year, which was back in early March. And I was number 12 or 16,000th on the list. And I still have not gotten a waiver or an authorization. So making a couple of phone calls, talking to some folks, some contacts that I've got. I had an hour-and-a-half call the other day with 4 FAA folks from all over. They're trying to help, because my position is unique. They haven't run into something like this before where I've got this many different types of operations. So they're doing their best to help me with that waiver and with some other stuff. And then now, based on our conversations last week, At the end of this week, we're going to have another conference call with nothing but the agricultural folks from the FAA. So we're going to start working on the agricultural part of this as well, because it's coming. We're going to try to get out ahead of it, but hopefully that whole thing will go well. So Part 107 regulations, you have to follow those as a drone operator. Especially if you're a remote pilot, you're going to know those inside and out, especially once you get your test done. There won't be any question. There may be some questions, but you'll get the answers. You'll figure it out. Okay. UF. So what do we have for rules, regulations, policies, and procedures for UF? So we've got university regulations, which I don't expect we'll ever have to use, but having done investigations, I can tell you that there is probably a university rule or regulation that applies to anything out there. So if I don't like the color of your shirt, I can probably find a university rule or regulation that will cover that, and you get written up for it. I don't expect us with drones to ever get to that part, but it does exist. Environmental health and safety. So we have a policy. It's on our website. I did not reproduce it here. You can get to our website, our main page, and there's a drone operations page, and it'll have a copy of the policy. Basically, the policy says that you need to register, and we're going to talk about it in the next couple of slides. Register your aircraft with us. Register yourself as a pilot with us. And then when you want to go out and fly, you'll submit a flight request, and we'll go over all that. So that's what the policy says. And it also says that we prefer, and we won't tell you you can't, but what we would like is for everybody that needs a waiver or an authorization to funnel that through our office. And then hopefully we can get it, because there may be other researchers out there that need it. So if we have it underneath the university umbrella, then you may be able to use the same one that somebody over in Palatka may be using. So if we funnel them all through this office, then it should be a much more efficient process. Plus, the FAA doesn't have to deal with 27,000 different requests coming from the University of Florida and 15,000 different people. Okay, should be a much more efficient way of doing it. So registration. So once you're ready to go and you've got your pilot certificate for UF, then you can go to that same website through EH&S, and you'll register yourself as a pilot, and you'll register the aircraft or aircrafts, more than one. You can register more than one pilot for one aircraft, or more than one aircraft for one pilot. And we'll see those pages coming up here in a second. And then you'll submit a flight request. Once you're in that system, I created the system. It's in a SharePoint database. And so once you're in that system, you'll go in, you'll submit your flight request, and we'll go over one of them, but basically who, what, when, where, and why. And then you'll submit it. It'll come to me. I'll double check it for a few things and then send it back out to you in the form of a permit to fly. Okay? And you'll see a copy of one of those. So here we go with the aircraft registration. Pretty simple stuff. Basic name, email, department, generic information. I've highlighted this in yellow because even though I helped create this system with our IT folks, I screwed it up the first time I did it. So that's why I want to make sure nobody else does the same thing, because it'd be easy to do. So after you've filled in all of your pilot information, don't click submit, click aircraft. Okay? If you click submit, then it's just going to send it on in. It's not going to associate you with an aircraft. So if you hit aircraft, then the next thing that comes up is this page. This is the aircraft page. And then you'll fill in everything about your aircraft. Okay? The registration number, who made it, what's the serial number. The only thing on here that you may have a question about is insurance required? That's going to be typically for a third-party vendor. If you get a paycheck from UF in any shape or form, you're covered by UF's insurance. If you don't, then you'll have to show us proof of insurance. Typically, vendors, like anybody that wants to come in from outside that's been hired to come in and do a video or some other kind of work, they'll have to show us proof of insurance with a $1 million liability policy that names UF as an additional insured. Pretty easy to do nowadays. You can do it online through Verifly or a couple of those other things. Not that difficult. After you've done your aircraft, then you would hit submit, and then you're in the system. Okay, so once you're in the system, then you can fill out a flight request. So flight requests are pretty simple. You'll put in your pilot certificate number, and it will go into the records, and it will pull everything out that pertains to you. And so then your drop-down boxes for your aircraft. So if you've got 3 aircraft that are associated with your pilot certificate, then those 3 aircraft will show up on that drop-down box, and you just pick which one you're going to fly that day. What department you with, some of it's a little bit redundant, but it'll be right there, and you can just click on the drop-down boxes. Flight information. Will you be flying on the main campus, yes or no? For most folks out here is no. That only just clues me in that I got to fill in Shan's care if it's going to be a local flight. Then, what kind of airspace are you going to fly in? Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, or Golf? We talked about that a few minutes ago. After you've gotten your Part 107 remote pilot certificate, you'll know all that. What date and time are you proposing to take off? So, as we all know, we're in Florida, right? And we may say, hey, you know what? It's Tuesday at 9 o'clock is when we're planning our flight. And then something else happens, and then next thing you know, it's raining like cats and dogs, so you can't finish your mission. So I don't have a problem if you would put in there, okay, you anticipated taking off at 9 o'clock, but what's the duration? The duration may be a 4-hour block, if you think you can get it done in 4 hours. And then just record exactly what time you flew, so that I'll have that for my stats. Route, probably right now isn't going to mean anything. You can put local in that box. It may become important once the FAA determines how we can do beyond visual line of sight. So it may go from here to over there to over there to over here. So now you've got a route that you're flying as opposed to just in one area. So you can put local. What altitude are you going to fly at? Proposed. AGL and MSL, above ground level. MSL is mean sea level. Most of us here in Florida are going to use above ground level. So what are you planning to fly at? And you can't fly drones over 400 feet without a waiver. So it needs to be 400 feet and below. So that's one of the things I'm going to look at in that box. There are folks out there that may need to fly higher than 400 feet for research or for whatever their particular project is. And if you do, then you need a waiver. Or you may already have a waiver. So that's the other thing, Part 107 waiver. If you have to go beyond one of those rules and regulations and you need that authorization, let me know. And if you already have it, let me know the number. Most of those authorizations or waivers will have an FAA number on. So that way I know that we're checking off all those boxes for the FAA. Location, latitude, longitude, and description. So put the latitude and longitude of where you're going to be flying. So as an example, we'll use this facility. You've got a pretty good sized facility here, land-wise. So you could put the latitude and longitude of this building if you wanted to, as a central place, but then under description put within 1/2 nautical mile of that. So if you've got a field over here, and a field over here, and a field over here that you're going to do, then, and you know they're all within a 1/2 mile or a 1/4 mile, just put that within a 1/4 mile distance from there. If it gets real tight airspace or something like that, which is what I'm using this for, then I'll call you and we'll talk about it, or I'll email you and we'll talk about it. But what I'm going to be looking for is I'm going to pull out a chart and I'm going to look at that latitude and longitude. I'm going to say, okay, great, it's all Class G airspace, it's uncontrolled, you're good to go. Or I'm going to say, you know what, you're real close, real life example, Homestead. Researcher said, yep, this is where I'm going to fly. I pulled it up, looked at it. It was within the Class Delta airspace for Homestead Reserve Air Base. So I'm like, and it was right on the edge. I'm like, no, that's actually inside. I said, but you know what? There's another field over here on the other side. Can you go to the other side of the street, literally? And he goes, oh yeah, that's not a problem. So he just moved to the other side of the street. And it kept us legal, kept him legal. The FAA does have the ability to fine people. And they're not afraid to make an example out of somebody. They could slap a civil fine on you for $10,000 and not blink an eyelash. And if they do that, the university, we don't have any recourse, because you're the pilot in command. So whoever the pilot in command is the one who bites off that liability. Yes?
See, because with a lot of the agricultural drones and things like that, they have automated flights. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of requirement that we put in the information for an automated flight?
No, I don't care whether you're manipulating the controls or you're doing it through Drone Deploy or Centera or one of those other automated ones. Just as long as I know where you're flying. How that actual flight is being conducted, whether it's autonomous or whether it's by you manipulating the controls, doesn't really matter. Because you're going to be responsible as a pilot in command no matter what's controlling those aircraft. All right. Payload and description, you can put, that's not a required field, but you can put it in there. We have folks that are using LiDAR, folks are using NDVI sensors, regular RGB cameras, FLIR, thermal imaging. So you can put that in there. That would help me track a few things, but it's not a required field. And then kind of last, what is the actual mission? And you can check one or all of those boxes. And this is going to help me with those statistics. On the backside that you guys never see in this SharePoint system, I can go in and I can sort by any one of these pieces of information. So I can go back in and I can say, okay, how many mapping missions have we done in the last 6 months? And then I can just click on that one label and it'll bring them all back to me. So that, and then a description. So, if you're going to be doing an ongoing project or something like that, you can say research mapping ongoing project under, whatever your actual project is. Which brings up another point. if you're doing a long-term project, so as an example, we'll say it's a semester-long project, and it's going to be in the same geographic area, so you're going to do this field, and you're going to do it for spring semester, and you're going to fly twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, to get your data. Well, I'm not going to make you fill out one of these flight requests for every single flight. If you'll put in the information like that, I can issue a permit that'll be a blanket permit for those 2 months, okay, to make it much easier on you. However, you do need to keep a flight log of the date and the time and the location that you flew. And then every 2 weeks, you'll send me a copy of those flight logs so that I'll know who flew where and when. And the main reason for that is I'm convinced, and it has not happened yet, but I'm going to be sitting at my desk, and I'll be fat, dumb, and happy one day, and my phone will ring. And I'll reach over, and I'll pick up the receiver, and before I can get it to my ear, I'll hear somebody on the other end screaming at the top of their lungs. And then I'll start talking to them, and it'll be an irate person that'll be saying, "Why was that drone flying over my daughter, spying on her at the pool?" And I'm going to go, "Okay, can you tell me where? Can you tell me when? Can you tell me what the drone looked like?" And then I can say, "No, sir, no, ma'am, based on my information, we keep statistics for every flight that we do. We didn't have anybody in that area." Or I can say, "Yes, ma'am, that's Wes. He's down there in Ona. I know who that is. I've spoken to him about this before, and that will not happen again." But no, that's not going to happen. But I guarantee you, I know what the privacy concerns are, and that's going to happen. It may not happen here, but it's going to happen someplace in the state. And as long as I have a copy of your flight logs, then I know what's going on, and it helps protect you a little bit, and it also helps to protect us. Okay? Observers. If you have an observer, which are not required for everything, they don't have to be a Part 107 remote pilot, but if you have an observer, you can put their name in. All right? Once you do that, then hit the submit button, and this is one that's already filled out, but basically the same stuff that I talked to you about. No real surprises there. Once you hit the submit button, then you'll get this message back that says it was submitted successfully. Once you do that, then it comes to me, I look at it, I'm going to check your airspace, I'm going to check your altitude, and that's pretty much about it. Make sure that you're not going to be busting any FAA rules and regulations. And then I'm going to hit approve, and it's going to send out in an email form a flight permit, which is what this is. Basic stuff that says that you've been vetted by the university, that we know where you're flying, that you're good to go. Legally, it has no standing whatsoever, but it is some form of documentation. So if somebody were to stop you on campus, let's say, UPD comes up and says, "Johnny student, why are you flying that drone?" And he can say, "Because I want to," or he can say, "No, sir, I have a permit from EH&S," and then they're good to go. Or if it's out here, again, you may get stopped by local sheriffs, or somebody, you can say, "No, I'm doing research. I can show you a copy of my permit from my agency if you'd like, from UF. Again, it doesn't really mean anything other than to us, but at least it's some form of documentation. It does add a little bit of legitimacy to what we're doing. Okay. So kind of hard to see, but there is a map here. I don't know if anybody can see it real well. Airspace. So I don't know 100% where you guys are at. I have to look. So that's Ona. I think you guys said you were down around here someplace. Rough general area. There is a website. It's an ArcGIS website, but it's called, for the FAA, it's called Visualize It. FAA Visualize It. And what it will do is it'll bring up the entire country, and you can zoom in, whether it's a street map type like this, or you can use satellite imagery with labels on it, but you can find the area that you're going to fly in. You don't have any here, but one of the things, if you're going to be flying anywhere near controlled airspace, is there's a thing coming, probably for Florida. It's scheduled to roll out late July. It's called LAANC, L-A-A-N-C. And so if you pulled it up on here, if you had one in your area, I would have shown it to you, but you'll have a bunch of little red boxes all around controlled airspace, typically around airports. Each one of those boxes will have a number in it, and that's an altitude number. What the system is supposed to do is, currently, if you want to fly in controlled airspace, you have to submit a waiver or an authorization application. And it could take anywhere between 60 and 90 days, or longer, as my case is, to get that approval back from the FAA. This is designed so that you can do it in real time. You'll have an app on your phone. You'll say, "I want to fly in these quadrants at this altitude." and then you'll hit send. It'll send it off to the company, and the company sends it off to the FAA, and then the FAA says, yep, you can fly there during this date, this time, these hours, and you can only fly at 200 feet or whatever they determine, and then it comes back to you, and you get an actual authorization on your phone, okay, with a number and the whole 9 yards to fly in controlled airspace. They say it's going to be seamless and it's going to run very quickly, and I hope that it does. Two bad things. One is that it's not scheduled to roll out until late July sometime for Florida, and then two, it's only going to roll out to FAA control towers. There are towers out there that are considered contract towers. So contract towers are staffed by a third-party vendor that works for the FAA. And even though they control all the aircraft in that area from that tower, this new system will require training and equipment that they do not have. And they are the ones that are going to be responsible for putting that equipment in. So are they going to pay for it, and are they going to put it in? So as an example, if you looked at the map, Gainesville's tower is not an FAA tower, it's a contract tower. So even though the boxes are there, we're not going to have Lance anytime soon in Gainesville because it's a contract tower. So I don't know. There are some lists where contract towers are on. If you look up contract towers, I think on the FAA's website somewhere you can find which ones are contract towers. And some of them are in actually pretty good sized airports. But that's going to be a hindrance. So because you're still going to have controlled airspace to deal with. So that's what this particular map is a map of that. And what that shading is showing you is Class E airspace. Class E airspace typically starts at 700 feet above the surface. Okay. Other class airspaces, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, always go to the surface. There are some Class E's that do go to the surface, and you'll have to look for those on the maps. And you'll be able to tell those because they have a different depiction. So E is controlled airspace, and it goes all the way to the surface, so then you got to pay attention to some of that. That'll typically happen around airports that have approach procedures, instrument approach procedures. So there may be a GPS approach, there may be, typically you're not going to find an ILS at a smaller airport like that, but there'll be some type of an instrument approach, and it may be a corridor that goes out on one of the runways. And that will be a little dotted line on the charts that you'll see that's an E that goes all the way to the surface. This is a sectional chart. This is sort of what you would fly if you were going to be flying a manned aircraft, but it's also what you're going to be tested on if you go to get your remote pilot certificate. And you can see that it has the same depiction here, okay, for that airspace. We were talking about this earlier. You can see typically around these airports, it's just around the airport. I have no idea why this one is a big box like this. There's a reason for it, I just don't know what it is. But sectional charts will give you a lot of information. The blue lines up here, this is dealing with Class Bravo airspace, which is Tampa. And you'll see some indications on the chart. So as an example of this, think about airspace real quickly as an upside down wedding cake. So as close to the airport as possible is the smallest part of the cake, and it comes up, and then it goes out, and then it comes up, and then it goes out. And that's what the shape of the airspace is. So that, as an example, this is the outer ring for Tampa. So controlled airspace starts at 6,000 feet and goes to 10,000 feet. And as a drone, you can't operate any higher than 400 feet, so you're not in controlled airspace there. Same thing under Class Charlie, which is over here. This is a little bit closer, but that's 1,200 feet is the floor and 4,000 feet is the ceiling. All right, so you've got to keep those in mind. If it goes all the way to the surface, then you'll see that. All right, so this inner ring would go, it's not on the chart here, but that goes all the way to the surface. So you'll get real adept at reading charts. I've got some up here. If you've got any, I've got one up here. If you've got any questions, we can go over the charts as well. So resources and contacts. This is my information. I do have some business cards up here. If you'd like one, just come and grab one after we get done. The only difference is that this number will go straight to my desk. The one on the business card will go to the front desk, the reception desk down front. So what resources? I can help with pilot training. I've done that quite a few times already where we have somebody that bought a drone, but they've actually taken the remote pilot certificate, but they've never actually touched a drone or flown one. So I can help you with that. I can either come to you guys, we can work that out, or we can have you come to Gainesville, one of the two. If you have aircraft registration questions, you won't on the smaller ones, but if you do on a larger, more than 55 pounds, get with me. It's a completely different process because it's an N number process now instead of the online $5 deal. Flight planning, one of the things that you'll notice that there are different things that you have to look at for flight planning. So quick example would be most batteries would last about 25 minutes. If I flew it inside this room right here, it would probably last for 30 minutes. But if I take it outside and there's a 15-knot wind, now it's fighting that 15-knot wind. So that 20-minute battery just became a 15-minute battery. So those are some of the things you need to think about in your flight planning. Are you going to be flying over water? Because water will mess with electronics, which is what these are. There's a couple other things too. Navigating the FAA system, we're talking waivers and authorizations, I can help with that. Industry contacts, I don't have a ton, but I do have a few. And where that may come in handy is if you're trying to buy a larger drone, then I may be able to point you someplace that is an alternative to whatever company you've been dealing with. And then obviously there's a competitive bid process that you might get a better bid from a different company or at least another bid. Equipment selection, so as an example, I had a young lady that was doing her thesis, and it was on sea turtle research, and she was headed to the Bahamas. So she was going to be doing stuff over the water to look at the grass beds for the turtles. So I was able to help her with equipment selection and pilot training. There are some drones out there that are designed to go in the water and that won't hurt them. And then there are some that will freak out when they get over water, like this little one that I've got. It freaked out over water, and I had no idea what it was doing. So there are some other things to think about as far as equipment selection goes. So a couple of pictures, obviously 34th Street traffic, I wish. This one really is the one that I put in the center because that's what everybody thinks you're doing with your drone, and this is what you're really doing. The privacy concerns for drones are out there, and they're just going to get worse. Okay? So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we do everything right, and we do everything more than right, because all it's going to take is one or two small incidents, and then that's going to, I won't say ruin it for everybody, but it's going to make it a lot worse for everybody. Okay? And that's basically it for my presentation. I do have something, but I'm running short on time, and I know that Wes has got a presentation, so I'm going to quit there. But I do have some stuff that if you want to see it, I'll pull it up on a laptop back here in the back. One of them is called Drone Deploy, and basically it's a separate software program that allows you to do a lot of things with the information that you gather with the drone. It does mapping, it does things such as measurements, quite a few measurements, whether that's, it will tell you if you got a pile of dirt out there, and then you fly over it and you capture that information, you take your cursor when you get back and you draw a line around that pile of dirt, it'll tell you how many cubic yards of dirt it is. So it'll do quite a few really, really good things. But I'll set that up back here on a laptop for you guys to see if you think so. Other than that, any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I'll set up this small drone. We actually have a drone that I brought, and it sits in that little itty-bitty bag right there. So it's on the smaller end of drones, but it'll do a lot of stuff, and I'll set it up back here too for everybody to look at. Thank you very much.